Hello, this is Rachel from Little Bird Quilting, and in this episode we're going to be creating the 16-inch star. This is one of 6 blocks that we're going to be creating over the next few weeks. This quilt will finish 80 by 96, and we will be creating 5 blocks of each of the 6 different blocks that we're going to be creating for the whole quilt. I selected a gray background with color on color fabric. So this block is going to be blue with a blue textured fabric and a solid blue fabric. And then my next block will be a different color and I'll have a solid and a texture of that color. But I'm keeping the gray as my background throughout the whole quilt. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we need to create one block is a 9 1/4 by 9 1/4 square of textured fabric. Then we need 2 4 7/8 by 4 7/8 textured fabric. We need 6 background fabrics. I'm using gray. These are 4 7/8 by 4 7/8, and I've gone ahead and already drawn a diagonal line from corner to corner on all of them. Then we need a 6 1/8 inch square of our gray background fabric. That's our center section. Then my solid fabric, it was 2 squares that were 4 7/8 by 4 7/8, and I cut them on the diagonal and have them ready. So what we're going to start with is we are going to do the square inside the square, which is a center section of our star. I'm going to go ahead and I'm folding my center square, which is 6 1/8 by 6 1/8, in half and just finger pressing so that I have a crease line. I want that crease line so that I can know where the exact center is. So I'm going to use the point on my triangle and I'm going to line that up with the crease right there. And I'm going to just scoot it down so that my edges are even. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch. I do have I like to sew with a short stitch length. So I have it set at 1.7 on my machine. And I'm going to go ahead and sew this side. Now I'm going to flip that side up, take another one of my triangles, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use that center crease line, and I'm going to line it up with the point of the triangle. And I'm going to go ahead and sew this side. I'm going to sew all the way, making sure the fabric stays lined up. I am going to go ahead and press this just because I want that seam allowance to be nice and flat, and I'm pressing my seam allowance out. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing using that folded crease line in the point of my triangle. Line up the edge. Get this side sewn down. And we've got one more side to do and we will have finished creating the square in the square. And if you feel like you can't see your crease, just go ahead and fold it again, just so you can see it a little clearer. You can press it. I don't normally press it just because usually just finger pressing is enough. Get this sewn. I am using gray thread in my bobbin and the top of my machine just because I try to get things to coordinate. and it allows that thread to disappear if some is showing through. So I'm going to go ahead and press. that. So now we have the center section of our star. Now we're going to go ahead and create the flying geese. So I have my 9 1/4 inch square, and I'm going to put down my 2 4 7/8 squares on top, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch on this side. We're going to go all the way down, making sure that that fabric doesn't move too much. And we're going to rotate it around, and we're going to go down the other side. I see my emergency pins are traveling with my fabric. I don't use pins very often, but I always like to keep 1 or 2 nearby just in case we need them. So now I'm going to go ahead and going to cut on that center line. And we're going to press the wings for our geese up. There's one. There's our second one. Now we're going to take 2 more squares. These are 4 7/8 inch squares. And we're going to do the same thing. A 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line. Oop. I think my needle came unthreaded. Yeah, you can always kind of hear when things, well, at least I can hear it when it just makes a different sound when your needle doesn't have any thread in it. So let's go ahead and get started. There's 2 flying geese, and we just got to cut those apart. Let's get these 2 done. You really want to make sure you know your machine's 1/4 inch. I cannot stress that enough. It's like the most important thing is to know where your machine needle needs to be to get an accurate 1/4 inch. Because if you're not sewing a real 1/4 inch, everything will be off. And my thread didn't get cut that time. So let me go ahead and separate these flying geese. Then we're going to press the wings up. So there's one. And it's just so much faster to make flying geese this way because you're doing 4 at a time. And they are all perfect. Okay, so now we need to create those corner sections. So I have 2 of my textured fabric and I have 2 of my background gray fabric. And these are 4 7/8 by 4 7/8. And I'm going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line. Do the other side. And the blocks in this quilt aren't necessarily difficult blocks. They are common blocks. you're going to see them a lot. But if you practice with, blocks that you understand how to construct, it improves your sewing. It doesn't always have to be this, massively intricate block. And one down this side. Now we're going to cut on that drawn line, splitting those up. Get this one split in half, and we're going to press. And when you press these, press to the background fabric. And you're going to see why I say to press to the background fabric in just a minute when we're putting these corner sections together with our flying geese sections. It helps us, give us the ability to be able to nest the seams together, because our flying geese seams are going to be going the opposite direction. One more. So now we've got all of our sections done. Now we're going to put them together. Move that out of the way. We're not going to need the rotary cutter anymore. So that's how our block's going to lay out. We're going to start by putting this cornerstone onto the flying geese. And since we pushed our seam allowance towards the gray, it'll now nest together because the flying geese is going the other direction. So let me go ahead and get those lined up. And get this side done. Now we're going to place this side on. And those seams, you can just push them up towards each other, and it makes it a lot easier to get those seams lined up. So there is the bottom section. We're going to go ahead and get this top end done. Got one more corner to put on. And when I'm putting these corners on, I always like to sew from where the seam's at. I always start, so I flipped it over, so I'm starting where I have two seams meeting together instead of starting at the end where there is no seam. I just think it gives me better control over what's happening at that seam. Thread didn't cut. There we go. So there is our top section. So now we're going to do our middle area, and I just kind of open it up and make sure I've got it lined up to the best of my abilities, because the corners of your flying goose are not always going to be perfect unless you trim them up afterwards, which you can. You could oversize these geese and then trim them down. They are 4.5 by 8.5 inch geese. So you could oversize it and then trim them down to that. But I'm impatient. I like to get it done. Get this side done. I'm going to sew all the way down. And when I get to the corner point, I slow down because I want to make sure it's going to hit that point if I can. Continue all the way down. Okay, so my thread cutter's not working. So there's our middle section. Here's our bottom and here's our top. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to put the top on. And I'm going to nest the seams together, and I want the middle section, their seams are going to go in. The top section seams are going to go out. Let me make sure I'm putting him on right. Let's not do any unsewing tonight. And start at the end. Make sure you got your seams nested. And I'm going to stop when I get to that center seam, and I'm going to see if I can line my points up to the best of my abilities. Continue to that center area. Slow down when you get to that center point, because sometimes your machine will not want to go over that bump, and it'll like push out to the side and not even be where you need your needle to be. I'm going to make sure my next seam are nested together. Continue all the way down. So we have our top section on now. Ooh, got a few threads coming through. Now we're going to put on our lower section. And I'm actually going to rotate him all the way around, make sure he's still in the right way. My center section is going in, my bottom section is going out. Nest those seams together. Gonna sew down to that first section. Try and line my point up to the best of my ability. And then we're gonna sew to that center point, slowing down as we get there to try and hit that point. Then I'm gonna nest my next intersection. And one last little section. And there is my 16 by 16 inch star, and he has a square inside a square in the center. And I'm going to be creating 5 of these, and that is what's going to give me my finished quilt. I'm going to be creating 5 squares of each of my 6 patterns. So we've completed our block. Now it's time for you to create your blocks. Next week, we'll be adding another block pattern, so see you then. And remember, if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Bye-bye.